Hello there, and welcome to this blood pressure masterclass, what your blood pressure is trying to tell you. I'm so excited to be offering this masterclass now. This is a new one for me. It is my first time doing this masterclass, so please be forgiving if I stumble over any of the slides. But I am so excited about this topic as I have had a personal experience with this, and now I want to help as many people as possible, especially people who feel like they're already doing all the things right, and all of a sudden, like they have high blood pressure, and it can be really frustrating and feel like your body is betraying you, and you've been trying to do everything you can to take care of it, and really ultimately your body is doing everything it can to take care of you. Your body is on your side. It's doing its best job. We just need to give it sometimes some different signals. So today is all about how to give the body the signals that it needs so that it can thrive on every level. So let's jump in. All right, so what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about that your blood pressure is talking to you. It is trying to tell you something. We're going to talk about why blood pressure goes up, the functional medicine lens that I look through as a functional medicine coach. We're going to talk about sodium a little bit. We're going to talk about investigating blood pressure and what could be causing it to be elevated. I'm going to talk about building resilience, cardiovascular resilience and blood pressure resilience, and next steps. So I am Angie Gallagher. I'm a functional medicine wellness coach, and I'm a former cardiac rehab clinician and director of a cardiac rehab department, hospital-based. And I'm here to help you understand what is truly driving vascular disease, including blood pressure, increased risk for heart attack, stroke, peripheral vascular disease, and dementia, as we know that dementia is also vascular related. So really how to optimize vascular and overall health so that you can not only survive, but truly thrive. I am so passionate about helping people live long and live well, live independently, live with zest, and then die really fast. You know, don't have a wasting away for 10, 15, 20 years in nursing facilities or having to be cared for. So heart disease is still, it has been and it still is the #1 cause of death and disability. But in the Western medicine model, we're often asking the wrong questions. Most people are just told your blood pressure's high, here's the medication you need to take, reduce your sodium intake. But very few are told why blood pressure is rising and why the heart is under strain in the first place. So why I do this work, so my background in cardiac rehab, working with people who were very compliant patients. This gentleman allowed me to share this picture. He is one of my favorite patients. He was in our program multiple times after multiple different cardiac events, and he was a runner. He was doing everything right. He was living a healthy lifestyle, and yet he kept coming back to cardiac rehab. So there were things that we were missing, and what I realized was that people cannot out exercise or out supplement or out medicate a dysregulated metabolism, chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, or nervous system dysregulation. So I didn't leave the cardiac rehab model because I don't believe in it. I left because I really wanted to help people address the true drivers of cardiovascular disease. So blood pressure is a responder, not a disease. So I always try to tell people blood pressure in and of itself high blood pressure is not a disease. It is a symptom. So we're going to be looking at the real drivers of high blood pressure. What's causing blood pressure to rise? Things like inflammation, glycation inside the arteries, oxidative stress, insulin resistance, nervous system dysregulation, inactivity, poor sleep, obesity, and there are other contributors. I won't have time to go into all of them, but we will be discussing the most common. So again, high blood pressure is not a diagnosis. It is a symptom, and it is trying to tell you something. So I want to share a little bit about my story, and I'm going to finish up with my story at the end of the presentation. But I am an ultra trail runner. So I've run, 50-mile races, 50K races, many of them over the last 5 years. I am a functional medicine wellness coach, so I know how to eat healthy. I primarily only eat whole foods, nothing processed. I take good care of myself. And I was starting to notice I wear an Oura ring, which is a ring that tracks some different metrics I don't know if you can see me holding it up on the screen, but it's tracking a lot of different metrics. And over the last 3 months or so, since April, I have noticed that a few of my metrics have been off and been showing that my cardiovascular age is aging. I think my cardiovascular age increased by 6 years in 3 months. And I thought, well, maybe it's just a weird, glitch with the ring. But then I was like, maybe I should just get a blood pressure cuff and check my own blood pressure. So I did, and I got 144/92. And I was shocked. I have never had high blood pressure. My blood pressure has always been low to the point of being turned away from giving blood. So this was really shocking for me. And I did check it, multiple times over multiple days, and I was getting around the same blood pressure. And that's when I realized, okay, so what have I been missing? What have I been not doing? What have I been leaving out of my self-care? And I'm going to get to all of those things at the end of the presentation. But I want you to know that I know what it feels like to be doing all the right things and then see these numbers that just don't line up with what the actions that you've been taking. And it can be very frustrating. So maybe this sounds familiar. If you're listening and you're like, yeah, I've been exercising. I never stopped exercising. I eat pretty well. I eat a pretty clean diet. I don't go out to eat all the time. I don't eat fast food. I've tried to do everything right, but now my blood pressure is high. What gives? So I just want to share, a couple of testimonials as we move through the program, because I have had the pleasure of working with several people with cardiovascular, either current cardiovascular diagnosis or people who are at high risk for cardiovascular disease. So this particular client says that I had been a lifesaver educating her about health and navigating a fairly traumatic cardiac health episode, and she now feels healthy and confident moving forward. So it's been such a joy for me to get to go back to my roots of working with cardiac patients, but doing it from a functional medicine lens. So blood pressure is not a report card. It is data. This is so important because so much of the time we feel like failures. We feel like I've somehow let myself down. So your blood pressure is a report card. It is data. It's not failure. It's not proof that you're unhealthy, and it's not necessarily proof that you're healthy. You can have normal blood pressure, but be missing some other underlying things. And I talk about that in my heart health and longevity masterclass, which I'll be doing that I'll probably be doing that again next week or the week after. So definitely try to show up for that class. But blood pressure is information. Look at it that way. So blood pressure 101. So what does it actually mean? So blood pressure is, we look at it in terms of, most of the time, two different numbers, your systolic number and your diastolic number. So your systolic blood pressure is the pressure exerted against the artery walls when your heart is contracting. So when your heart's pushing that blood out and the blood is reaching its maximum pressure inside the artery wall, that's your systolic blood pressure. And then when the heart is in between beats and it's in its relaxed state, then that's the pressure exerted against the artery walls at that time. And then your pulse pressure is basically the difference between the two. So the higher any of those three numbers, the more pressure being exerted against the artery wall over time. So blood pressure is determined by how much blood your heart's actually pumping out and the vascular resistance happening in the vessel beds. So how much blood is your heart pumping out? How in a normal, we look at that in terms of ejection fraction. So ejection fraction, how much blood the left ventricle pushes out with each contraction. How rapidly is that happening? So what's the heart rate? How many times is the heart beating in a minute? And then how much resistance is in the vessels? So if we have vascular resistance, that could be because of inactivity. People who smoke tend to have much less elasticity in their arteries. We do have less elasticity as we age, but we can mitigate that by being physically active. And they look at, when they do biopsies, or not biopsies, when they do autopsies, and they compare the blood vessels of people who were active They did a study looking at people who were runners and ran, into their later years. And they had much more elasticity in their arteries at the time of death, and lived longer lives, and then had more elasticity in their arteries than their sedentary counterparts. So we really want to maintain that elasticity. And we do that through diet, through exercise, through sleeping well, through not smoking. So we'll talk more about that. So your arteries aren't plumbing pipes. They are very dynamic. So your blood vessels are biologically active. They constrict, they dilate, they respond to signals from the nervous system. So when we're stressed, they respond to that. They respond to the hormones in our body. So when we are stressed and we have high cortisol, and that cortisol is elevated at the expense sometimes of our sex hormones. So when we have high cortisol, we might be losing DHEA or losing the ability to produce progesterone or estrogen, and that's going to come at a cost. The kidneys are very involved in our blood pressure regulation. And so if we have any kind of kidney issues, then we have to be very, very careful and make sure you're working with a kidney specialist. And then the endothelium itself produces nitric oxide and other signaling molecules. So the endothelium is we're going to talk about what it is, but it's the inner layer of your blood vessel. And it's a very dynamic and active part of your body. It's not just passive. So blood pressure is the end result of communication between all of these multiple systems. It's much more complex than I think a lot of people give it credit for. So this is where we have this bridge into the functional medicine model, because functional medicine is all about addressing the body as a system. So everything is connected. So the blood pressure web. So this is just a really good visual that tells you how much your blood pressure is affected by so many different things. If you look at this diagram, and I'll be sharing this on social media so people can have this and print it and remember. So our nervous system, I love that it's at the top. Our nervous system is so critical to our blood pressure regulation. When we are stressed out and in a fight or flight state, our blood pressure is going to be elevated. Kidney and fluid balance, our vascular and endothelial health. So we're going to talk more about that endothelium. Our metabolic health, we'll talk more about that. Sleep, we're going to go into each of these areas in more detail. So you look at this web, this diagram, it really shows you how many things are impacting blood pressure. So your nervous system can change your blood pressure in minutes. So I think that with the immediate reaction to stress, physiologically is 90 seconds. So 90 seconds of, like, say we have to veer out of the road really fast because we're almost going to be hit by a car. So that's a very immediate stressful situation. Our body physiologically is going to react to that exact stressor for 90 seconds. But any additional thought or ruminating or worrying or anything that we add to it, that is optional. That doesn't have to continue to create stress in our body, but we oftentimes let it. So we have the stress, we have sympathetic activation. So our nervous system moves over into the sympathetic fight or flight. We have increased heart rate and contractility. We have increased vasoconstriction, so that blood pressure increases. But if we learn how to manage stressors in our life, and we learn how to change our breathing, change our thought processes, we can pull ourselves back over into that rest and digest parasympathetic side of the nervous system. So also, if we're not sleeping, if we're chronically ill, if we have chronic pain, if we're overtraining, if we're underfueling, if we have unresolved work stress, if we're in a constant state of fear over, whatever we might be having going on in our lives, fear and worry, even anxiety about taking your blood pressure. And this is where we can get into this really nasty cycle. So really important that you're aware of whether you are in your sympathetic or your parasympathetic side of your nervous system. And I always encourage people to ask their family members, because sometimes we can't see that we're in a state of stress, but our family members will be able to tell us, oh yeah, like you seem stressed. Okay, here's another just testimonial real quick. Another client of mine who had a cardiac diagnosis, and he felt like a lot of his concerns about his health really were um, uh, lessened by changing the way he ate, taking the garbage out of his diet, eating healthy whole foods. He lost a bunch of weight, and working with me really helped to get some of those, the health scare issues kind of went away. So some of the things that, without going into too much detail of his case, a lot of the things that he was worried about were kind of eliminated as a result of working with me and really improving his day-to-day choices and how he took care of himself. So the white coat effect is real. So we really want to remember to get home readings. If you go to the doctor and that's the only time you get your blood pressure checked is sitting in the doctor's office, that may not be an accurate indication of where your blood pressure is most of the time. I really encourage people to do home readings and to look at it as data collection, not obsession. So we measure, we don't obsess. That's very key. If you're going to take your blood pressure at home, but you're going to be in a spiral of stress every time you take it, that's not going to be a good idea either. So we need to learn how to look at blood pressure as information, as data, and collect it in the right, check it and measure it in the right way. So we're going to talk about what that looks like. Okay, so before we get into the measuring, let's talk a little bit more about what other things affect blood pressure. So blood sugar and blood pressure are like super interconnected. You cannot pull them apart. They are very closely linked. So when insulin resistance develops, it frequently travels with high levels of insulin circulating throughout the body. That can alter kidney sodium handling. We have greater sympathetic activity. So meaning we're getting pushed over into that sympathetic side of the nervous system, that fight or flight. We can end up having vascular dysfunction. The vessels don't like excess insulin. The lining of our arteries don't like it when there's all this extra insulin hanging around. And that's a result of insulin resistance. That means that you've probably been eating a diet high in simple carbs, and your body has had to push out more and more and more insulin to balance the blood sugar. We often see weight gain and visceral adiposity, meaning fat being stored around the abdomen and around all of the important organs of the body. And then ultimately, that's leading to greater risk of hypertension or high blood pressure. So blood pressure can sometimes be the early clue that there is metabolic health imbalance going on. Some people may have high blood pressure before they even see that their blood sugar is elevated or their insulin levels elevated. So it's all connected, and one can beget the other, and one can give us clues about the other. And a normal blood glucose doesn't always tell the whole story. So metabolic dysfunction can begin before we even see blood sugar becoming abnormal on labs. So really important to not just look at fasting glucose, but add in a hemoglobin A1C. That's going to give us an idea of our blood sugar over a 3-month period of time. We want to know triglycerides and HDL. We want to be checking our waist circumference and or our body composition. And if you can get your visceral fat index checked, there are machines that will tell you that. If you're curious, if if they're offered in your area, if you're in the Corvallis, Oregon area, I can tell you where you can find it. But you can also probably Google and find an area, find a place in your area that has those kinds of measuring devices. We of course are going to be checking blood pressure regularly, fasting insulin. So how much insulin is circulating in your system to be able to maintain normal blood glucose. So normal blood glucose is one side of a teeter-totter. So if it takes a lot of insulin to keep your blood sugar balanced, then that's not good. We want to be able to have low blood sugar and low insulin. That means that we're insulin sensitive. So we can know a little bit more about how our body's responding to the various foods we eat by getting a glycomark. A glycomark is a test that gives an indication of how many times your body's spiking blood sugar. You can also wear a CGM. I love wearing a CGM. That's a continuous glucose monitor. I will wear a CGM for like a month, like maybe twice a year. And it gives me really good feedback into how my body's metabolizing different foods. And it helps me really fine tune my diet so that I'm not seeing any spikes. I'm seeing nice gradual glucose levels. So your body may compensate with higher insulin for years before your blood glucose rises. That is not good. You do not want high insulin. That is damaging to the vessel wall. And when your vessel wall becomes damaged, that's when blood pressure can start to creep up. So meet your endothelium. So speaking of blood vessel walls. So blood vessels aren't just passive pipes. So the endothelium is a thin cellular lining inside the blood vessels, and a healthy endothelium does help to regulate the blood vessel dilation and constriction. So when your blood vessels dilate, blood pressure drops. When your blood vessels constrict, blood pressure increases, and your endothelium helps to regulate that. It helps to regulate blood flow, and it helps to regulate blood pressure. It helps to regulate clotting, inflammatory signaling, and your endothelium actually secrete nitric oxide, and nitric oxide itself helps to increase blood vessel dilation. So there's a lot happening in your endothelium. They are not just passive. It's our own little kind of mini organ system. Okay, so nitric oxide is your natural vasodilator. It helps to keep widen and relax your blood vessels. It helps support healthy blood flow, keeps your vessels flexible, maintains healthy blood pressure, and it improves exercise performance because it does help dilate and get more blood flow out to those working muscles. You can support your nitric oxide production with movement. So exercise helps to increase nitric oxide. Leafy greens, beets, arugula, having good metabolic health. So again, having a diet that doesn't have you spiking your blood sugar after every meal. And then of course, not smoking is key. That goes without saying. Okay, I am going to come back and make sure there's no questions. Okay, so if there's questions, please type those into either the chat or the Q&A, and I'll try to keep an eye on those, but probably easier if we wait till the presentation's done because I have to be on 2 separate screens. Okay, so let's talk about salt. Is it really the enemy? And the answer is it depends. So some people are sodium sensitive, and they do have to be careful with how much sodium they're getting. But not everyone is. And salt gets thrown under the bus all the time by many doctors. And they tell people, cut your salt out. And actually what can happen is if people don't get enough salt, that blood pressure can increase. Salt is a necessary mineral. It is. This is something people really need to remember. Sodium is a necessary mineral. Our body doesn't produce sodium. We have to get it. And it is integral for different things to happen in the body. So there's a thing called the sodium potassium pump, and that helps to get hydration across the cell wall and into the cell. If we have no sodium, then the sodium potassium pump doesn't work. And that's going to lead me to another slide where we're going to talk about potassium and how important potassium is to balance sodium so that they work together synergistically so that your blood pressure stays nice and regulated. We don't need to take all salt out. If you are someone who has heart failure or you have significant renal issues, like there may be certain people who, because of their own specific medical condition, need to be really watching their salt. This slide and this presentation is not for them. I am not speaking to people who have renal disease, who have heart failure. So I want to make it very clear, and those people need to be working very closely with their doctor. But the rest of us, we need to have some sodium in our diet. So blood pressure, of course, is affected, like I said before, by your kidney function. Age does have an effect. It's sad but true. We all get older, and ideally we want to keep getting older, and that means that there may be some loss of elasticity. But the biggest takeaway about age is that you can slow that loss by living in a way and making the daily decisions that keep your body functioning more optimally. You don't have to lose that elasticity, but it requires that you make those daily choices in favor of your healthy future. Of course, your metabolic health, there are some medications, and we'll talk a little bit about how to approach that. And then if you do have salt sensitivity, but the goal is not to fear salt, it's to understand your physiology. We all aren't equally salt sensitive. Some people experience a greater blood pressure response to sodium than others. Salt sensitivity does increase with age. If you start to develop hypertension and it's like not very well controlled, then that can make you a little more sensitive, and salt can cause that to get worse. If you have kidney dysfunction, if you have metabolic dysfunction already, certain genetic factors, then that can make you a little more sensitive to sodium. But the key is that we're doing all the things that prevent us from getting into that state. So remember, dietary sodium doesn't just come from the salt shaker. And this is a really big takeaway right now. Most sodium comes from packaged, restaurant, and highly processed foods. I think I saw a graphic that someone did, and they did kind of a meta-analysis, and they determined that 80% of people's salt intake came from sandwiches. People eat sandwiches that have, there's just all kinds of salt in the meats, maybe in the cheese, maybe in the bread, and maybe in, various sauces that they're putting on there. But sodium is, again, a necessary mineral. And when we're getting it from Himalayan sea salt, from Celtic sea salt, and we're not getting it from packaged, processed, garbage foods, it's going to be much better for us. So salt gets sort of like blamed, like guilty by association. People think salt's bad because it's in so many of the garbage foods that we eat that make us sick. Okay, so potassium, we can't forget about potassium. So blood pressure isn't only a conversation about sodium, and it's really not even a conversation about sodium. I mean, sodium's part of it, but it's important that we look at just mineral balance in general. So we've got to have potassium in our diet to support and balance the sodium, because they work together. So we really want to have that potassium to help with healthy blood pressure and vascular function. And you're going to get potassium in avocados, beans and lentils, leafy greens, potatoes, sweet potatoes, winter squash, yogurt, bananas, oranges, and other fruits. So I like people to think, okay, what is the least glycemic food that I can eat to get that potassium? I see some people eating bananas all the time because they're like, oh, I got to get my potassium. And then their blood sugar is high because they're eating so many bananas. Tropical fruit tends to spike our blood sugar. Some people not as much as others, but it's important to know. And that's, again, a great reason to wear a continuous glucose monitor, because you can see exactly how your body is responding to the foods you eat. But bananas, they're fine once in a while, but if you're having them all the time, then you could be spiking your blood sugar and not aware of it. So I encourage people to go after all of the other things on the list here, and use bananas a little more sparingly. Some people may need to do a potassium supplement. I did decide to get one for myself, but I'll tell you what really made the biggest difference for me in getting my blood pressure back to normal. Sleep is critical. It is your overnight blood pressure reset. So during healthy sleep, blood pressure normally decreases, and it's supposed to dip about 10% as we sleep. So poor sleep or sleep disorders can interfere with the pattern. And so you need to consider, not just are you getting enough sleep? So, you're going to bed and you're getting out of bed time, like that should be 8 to 9 hours, but how much of that time are you actually asleep? And that's going to vary. And some of us get really good quality sound sleep, and others of us get kind of crappy sleep. So how is your sleep? Not just how much, but what's the quality of it? How frequently are you waking? Do you snore? Do you stop snoring and have sleep apnea and it's not treated? That is critical. If you have ever been told that you snore and then you stop snoring and kind of convulse and gasp, then you absolutely need to get in for a sleep study. Sleep apnea is one of the biggest risk factors for high blood pressure, for atrial fibrillation, for stroke. So we've got to have that treated. Do you wake feeling refreshed, or do you wake feeling like you're still sleepy and then you're sleepy throughout the day? So really important to look at the quality of your sleep. And then alcohol. So I remember back in the day working in cardiac rehab, we used to say, men should have 2 drinks a day, women should have 1 drink a day, and alcohol is cardiac protective. Oh my goodness. We were so wrong. There are polyphenols in wine that are beneficial, but we can get polyphenols in a lot of different foods. We don't have to have wine to get the benefit of polyphenols. Alcohol does affect our body in a lot of unhelpful ways, and actually alcohol turns into toxin in the body. I'm not telling you to never drink. I love a glass of wine now and again. I very, very much do. But I drink way less now since I've learned everything I've learned in my functional medicine training than I used to drink. I used to drink a glass of wine every day, and now I try to limit it to like 2 days a week. So alcohol affects your microbiome. It's alcohol, right? And so your bacteria get washed in that, and it kills things. It kills some of those bacteria, those helpful bacteria that we don't want to kill. And our microbiome is really involved in our metabolism. So that's one thing we need to consider. And then alcohol itself does contribute to elevated blood pressure. So we need to ask ourselves, how often am I drinking? How much am I drinking? Does it affect my sleep? And I absolutely can say that it affects my sleep. Does my blood pressure change when I drink less? So, and you really need to give yourself a good stretch of time without alcohol in order to answer that question. If you're just like, oh, I'm going to go 1 or 2 days without drinking and then check my blood pressure and see if it's down, that's not enough time. You've got to give yourself, I would say a good couple weeks without alcohol, even 3 or 4 weeks, like do a dry month and then see what your blood pressure is. Individual responses will vary. And so that's why it's just really important that we recognize that we're all in our own ecosystem. So individual response is important. Okay, midlife changes that affect the cardiovascular landscape. So menopause doesn't simply cause high blood pressure. I think it's really erroneous to blame things strictly on menopause. But if we don't change the way we're showing up for ourselves during the menopause years, we can end up with some detrimental health problems. So in menopause, estrogen declines. We all know that. Estrogen has cardioprotective benefits to it. It affects vascular function. It affects our body composition. It affects our insulin sensitivity. It affects sleep, how we respond to stress, physical activity. So we have to think about all of these things. Like if we're in the menopause years, are we maintaining a healthy physical activity regimen? Are we learning how to manage the stress that's often involved in those menopause years? We oftentimes have, teenage kids or a little older, but there may be some stress associated with parenting. There may be some stress associated with aging parents that are starting to have medical problems. We're still maybe working full time. We've got a lot of demands. How are we dealing with that stress? Are we giving ourselves the care and the attention that we need to keep ourselves in our parasympathetic state? Or are we all jacked up in our sympathetic nervous system and just in fight or flight every day, just trying to get through the day? We're not doing any meditation or breath work or any real self-care because we're taking care of everybody else. So important to look at these things, because that stress response is going to affect our body composition, our insulin sensitivity, how well we sleep. So our cardiovascular needs are going to change when we're in our 60s and our 50s compared to maybe our 40s. Things change. And that's okay. That's the thing I want people to know is like, it's okay. Like menopause does not have to be this like downward spiral, which so many people believe that it is. We just have to show up differently for ourselves. And there are countries in the world where women just sail through menopause years, and they look at us in the States and think, what are you guys doing? Like menopause isn't a thing here. Like it's just like a transition, in life, but like it's not this big downward spiral where we end up with all of these, hot flashes and moodiness and belly weight and blood pressure rising. So important stuff to consider here. Okay, just another quick testimonial. So this was one of my favorite examples of what can change when you really address health from a functional standpoint. I won't read all of this. It's kind of wordy, but this particular gentleman worked with me to improve his cardiovascular health after having I think he had a stent put. He had a stent put in one of his arteries. And as a result of working with me, he lost, I think, 40 pounds. Yeah, 40 pounds. And his psoriasis went away. And that's the beauty of functional medicine. When you heal the gut, when you heal the nervous system, when you do all of this foundational work, things get better that you don't even expect are going to get better. Things people have that they think, oh, this is just going to be with me, for the rest of my days. And they clear up and they go away, when you look at the body as a system and you heal it as a system. So I love working with this guy. And he's, to this day, I know he's still doing awesome. So what are some steps that you can take today to just start giving yourself the care that you need, that your body needs? Okay, so one thing is, is there something you're taking that's affecting your blood pressure? So some medications and substances can raise blood pressure in certain people. So we need to be aware of those. Are you chronically taking non-steroidal anti-inflammatory? Are you taking a lot of ibuprofen or naproxen or various anti-inflammatory over-the-counter drugs? Are you taking a lot of decongestants, stimulants, corticosteroids, some antidepressants, some hormone medications? And some people are working, with doctors that aren't really experts at hormone replacement, and they're kind of just, like trying, but they really don't have a lot of experience or expertise in it, and people's hormones get completely out of whack. You really need to work with a doctor who knows how to do hormone replacement therapy if you're doing that. Certain supplements, licorice containing products. So DGL is a good example. People use DGL to heal their stomach wall, and that can also elevate blood pressure. So good to know. I'm not telling you to stop anything that you're taking, like please don't, but instead review these things with your healthcare provider and discuss about, is there an alternative to this? Can I take a break from this and try something else and see if that helps me reduce my blood pressure? Become a blood pressure detective. So don't just ask, what is my blood pressure? Ask, when it's elevated, what are some patterns? Like, am I seeing it more elevated in the morning versus the evening? Do I notice it's higher after I feel like I've gotten a poor night of sleep? Is it higher when I feel like I've had a lot more stress or like chaotic days? Is it higher when I've had more caffeine or more alcohol? Is it higher, after like an hour or two after my exercise, which could be an indication that you are pushing too hard, because that blood pressure should generally come down after exercise. It's one of the many benefits of exercise, is that it will have an immediate lowering after you're done and recovered. So if it's elevated, that could be a sign that you're pushing yourself too hard. And then pain and illness can definitely elevate blood pressure. So really important not to freak yourself out if you're, if you've got the flu or you've got, a stomach bug, like you're gonna have high blood pressure during that period of time. So don't add stress by worrying about that. It should come down once you've recovered. And then checking, knowing the difference between your home readings and your doctor's office readings. So patterns can give us a lot of clues. And are you measuring it correctly? So you want to avoid stimulants for at least 30 minutes before you check. Exercise, caffeine, smoking. Ideally, you're not smoking at all. I don't think you would be here today on this in this class if you were, but you want to empty your bladder. You want to be able to sit quietly for at least 5 minutes and have your mind kind of distracted, not like just fixated on what's my blood pressure going to be. You want your back supported, your feet flat on the floor, and your legs uncrossed. You want to have your arm at heart level. So you don't want to have it like too low or too high. And then use the correct cuff size. So if you're using a tiny little cuff, but you have a really like big arm, you're going to get a higher than normal reading. It's going to overestimate. If you're using a really big cuff, but you have a smaller arm, then you're going to underestimate. So you need to be aware, and most of the blood pressure cuffs have a little guide, and that guide, it basically says like it should be able to cover half the diameter of your arm. And it may be different for different cuffs or different brands, but there should be a guide on the cuff that you buy that tells you, is this cuff meant for your size arm? And you can usually, measure your arm before you buy a cuff and make sure you're getting one that's meant for the size of your arm. And then don't take one rush reading and think that that's, the end all be all. We want to give ourselves a chance to get a trend and not just one number and think that that's it. Look for patterns, not perfection. So track your blood pressure alongside how your sleep is, how your stress is, your exercise levels. If you're using alcohol, look for trends over days and weeks, not just individual fluctuations. We have to measure to learn our body, not to feed our anxiety. Okay, so other things that are worth investigating. So, what's happening with your blood pressure patterns at home? Do you have a lipid panel that is worrisome? Is your ApoB or your Lp(a), are those elevated, and have they been that way for a while? How's your glucose and your A1C and your fasting insulin? How's your kidney function? Are your electrolytes off? Have you been not getting sufficient hydration because you're not getting electrolytes? We generally need electrolytes, and if you're not getting them in your food, you might need to take an electrolyte supplement. How's your thyroid function? Don't just get a simple TSH. Ask your doctor for a comprehensive thyroid panel. A simple TSH does not give the full picture of your thyroid. How's your sleep? Do you have medications or supplements that you suspect could be, problematic? Do you have a strong family history? I have a family history of high blood pressure. My dad's been on high blood pressure medication for years. He also was a runner. So did he have a perfect diet? No. So I know that I'm, definitely have an advantage over him because he didn't have a diet that was really dialed in for optimal blood pressure. And then just looking at overall cardiovascular risk, and that's something you work with your doctor on. You can, I actually do a lot of lab testing for people in my program. So if people feel like their doctors aren't doing as comprehensive a testing as they want, I'm happy to order testing. I do it all the time. I don't diagnose or treat disease, but I help you learn your own body. I help you get information about your body that you might not be able to get otherwise. Okay, so the testing should answer questions, not simply create more numbers to get fixated on. So that's another thing that I just love doing. I love helping people make sense of the numbers so that they really can understand their own body and their own physiology better. Okay, so the foundations are all really powerful. I mean, there's nothing more important than these foundational principles. We have to nourish our body with the right food. We've got to eat those colorful, vibrant foods. We need lots of variety. We should be eating the rainbow. We should be getting 30 to 35 different plant foods in our diet every week. We should be building, moving and building cardiovascular fitness and reducing sedentary time. We should have some structured exercise, but we should also have unstructured, just movement throughout the day, just getting up and moving every hour. You could do some lunges or some squats or maybe some dumbbell curls, but we should be moving throughout the day. We should have muscle. Muscle helps to lower our blood glucose. It increases and improves our metabolism, and it's the longevity. It's the currency of longevity. Muscle is so important, and we should be lifting heavy things. And I'm an exercise physiologist, so in my programs, I help people establish exercise regimens that will work for them. We need to be getting the right and the appropriate amount of sleep. We need to have good recovery. Some people, I will put myself in this category, can push too hard. If a little's good, a lot must be better. So they exercise to an extreme and they don't give themselves enough recovery, enough time for restoration. And then we have to regulate our nervous system. That should actually be at the top. I should have put regulation or regulate at the top, because without a regulated nervous system, many of the other things aren't possible. I've worked with many people who are really just, their nervous system is kind of jacked. They're really in their fight or flight. And when we try to put these lifestyle practices in place, they just can't. They don't have the bandwidth to make healthy choices. And so we've got to start with getting ourselves into a state of calm and peace and regulation in our nervous system. It's just, there's really no option. So eating for our blood vessels, what does that mean? So instead of thinking, well, what do I have to give up? Think, what can I add? What are the things that I can eat more of? We want lots of colorful plants in our diet. We want lots of fiber. We want those leafy greens. We want the potassium-rich foods. You can see that there's all of those things are in this bowl here. This is like a salmon power bowl. So there's some salmon in there. It looks like it's like almost raw, which is great. Like when we overcook our meats and our proteins, that makes them cause glycation in our body, which is kind of an aging. We're causing a glucose molecule to stick to a protein molecule, and it becomes very damaging. So we don't want to burn or overcook our meat. So I love seeing bowls where the meat is either raw or, just seared. So nitrate-rich foods, those are going to be in the leafy greens, the beets. There's another slide that you can refer back to. I'll have this presentation will be available. I'll have it. It's recorded and it'll be available for replay. And then omega-3 rich foods, which are getting the omega-3s in that salmon, adequate protein. Really, everybody should be getting about 100 grams of protein per day. And then minimally processed foods, really staying away from things that come out of a box or a bag, really trying to get those whole foods, building the abundance before trying to restrict, really important for the nervous system. And then movement. Movement is blood pressure medicine. Your heart and blood vessels were designed for movement. Our entire body was designed for movement. So things that you could be doing are daily walking. Walking after meals is really, really effective. Getting that aerobic exercise, getting the strength training. Exercise snacks is one of my favorite things. The science has come out showing that 2 to 4 minutes of higher intensity exercise 3 to 5 times a day has just as much, if not more, benefit than like a slow to moderate half-hour walk. So if you have a hard time finding big chunks of time for exercise, you can bring it down to just like 2 to 4 minutes, but do a little more intensely. Like maybe you do 20 lunges on each side, and then you do some body weight squats, and maybe you do some wall push-ups, maybe you do a few jumping jacks, but 2 to 4 minutes, and then you're done. And then you do that again a couple hours later. So it's a much smaller amount of time. As long as you can do it at a vigorous enough intensity, you get great benefits. We want to reduce prolonged sitting. We really want to make sure that we're giving our body regular movement throughout the day. You have a desk job, just getting up and walking to the bathroom and back, going down a flight of stairs and coming back up, doing some squats or lunges, just moving, getting outside for your breaks and getting natural light and taking a walk. But remember, for those of you who are, driven and kind of type A like me, more is not always better. We have to have the recovery. We have to know when we're pushing too hard and when we need to build in more time for the rest and the recovery and the things that sometimes we don't want to do because we like to, keep moving. And so it's important that we recognize when the body needs the rest. Regulate before you measure. So getting yourself into a nice, calm setting, trying to, close doors, shut off notifications, sit quietly, relax your shoulders, unclench your jaw, relax your forehead, just unclench everything, breathe slowly, naturally, give yourself 5 quiet minutes. And remember, you're not trying to beat the test. You're just measuring to get data. Okay. And then I want to share my story. I don't have much time left, but I want to just tell you. So I told you that I had the high blood pressure. Super shocking as an ultra trail runner and a healthy, otherwise healthy person with healthy habits. But what I learned was that for about 3 months, when my Oura ring was telling me that my numbers were not as ideal, I had stopped all of my nervous system regulation activities. I stopped getting in my sauna. I stopped doing my breath work. I stopped prioritizing sleep. And I allowed myself to just get all spun out about the stresses in my life, and we all have stress, and building a business is stressful. But I was letting it really affect my body physically, and I wasn't doing the things that I knew I needed, the grounding. for a while, I was getting up every morning and I was doing a little sun salutation, and then I would follow that with a little abundance meditation. And I was doing that every morning. I stopped all of that. I was doing breath work very routinely. I have a friend who teaches it. And actually, for those of you who stay to the end, you're going to get a free trial sample of breath work. My friend Benedict it's our gift to you that you can join her for a free breath work session. So what I'll do is I have your emails, and so I will be emailing you a link that you can click on to get that started. So her name is Benedict. She's a beautiful breathwork facilitator. So I went back to, I bought her library. She has a library of recorded sessions. So I bought that. I've been doing it every day. I have been in my sauna because that's where I do my best relaxation. I've been using a vagal nerve stimulator, which I don't have in front of me, but it's called the Pulsetto, and it stimulates your vagus nerve. It vibrates right on the where the vagus nerve passes through here on each side of your throat. I prioritize sleep. I prioritize more recovery. I stopped running as fast and as far, and just really focus on self-care. And my blood pressure, when I checked it a couple of days ago, my boyfriend checked it for me. It was 108/76. I was elated. I was like over the moon, excited and happy to see that change. And I mostly just focused on my nervous system. So again, all the other things were in place for me. If they're not in place for you, you may have some other things to work on. If you're not eating a healthy diet, if you're not moving your body regularly, if you're not getting good sleep, those are things that are really important. And nervous system regulation is not going to correct for all of those things. It's one piece of the puzzle. And it was the biggest piece for me because of all the other pieces I already had in place. So it is a great example of how that self-care is important. I could have just gone and gotten on a blood pressure medicine and it probably would have brought it down. But I don't want to be on medication. That is my goal, is to go my entire life and not have to be on medication. If I have to, I will. But if I can manage it without, then that's my preference. And so I was really happy to see that when I put that self-care back in place, my blood pressure came down naturally. So I learned how important self-care is. I learned how effective breath work is. I remembered how helpful my sauna is. Sauna is not for everybody. So I'm not telling you to go do a sauna. I'm just saying that for me, that helps me. It dilates my arteries. It helps me relax. I became more appreciative of the importance for making time for all of it. I learned that more exercise isn't always the answer. And I learned that I am worth making time for self-care. We have to know our worth. We have to know how important it is to take care of ourselves, because many of us are taking care of everybody else and we're putting our own needs last. So breath work is an incredible way to lower blood pressure. It is a direct pathway to your nervous system. Slow, controlled breathing can shift the body away from sympathetic fight or flight into the parasympathetic. This can help reduce heart rate, reduce that sympathetic nervous system activation, improve our autonomic balance, which basically it means improving our nervous system balance, supports blood vessel relaxation and dilation, and then drops or reduces blood pressure. So you can try it. You can try it on your own. You can just, slow your breathing down to about 5 or 6 breaths per minute, inhaling and exhaling gently, really extending the exhale, not forcing, not hyperventilating, not huge breaths, just thinking slow, comfortable, relaxed, and just slowing it down to the extent that you can. It's not going to replace other treatment for blood pressure. Like I said, nervous system balance is a piece of the puzzle. It's not gonna change the fact if you're not eating healthy and you're not exercising and so forth. So it's looking at the entire physiologic environment. But the nervous system is part of your cardiovascular system. So here's a picture. This is Benedict, and she's going to be offering some free sessions this weekend that you can get on and try. They're group sessions that she does on Zoom. But you can also join one of her she's doing some weekend sessions, but she has weekday sessions also. And so they're different types of breath work. So I will send you links to her site, and you can see what different types of breath work she offers and decide which one will be right for you. But it has been just absolutely pivotal for me in my journey, and I cannot say enough about breath work. It really is everything. It's very powerful, very, very powerful. Okay. So the vagus nerve, I just want to touch on this briefly, and then I'm going to have to hop off because I do have a 1 p.m. Coaching session. But the vagus nerve is the major pathway of the parasympathetic nervous system. It is your body's rest, recover, and restore system. So when we can support the vagus nerve, we can reduce heart rate, reduce that sympathetic fight or flight, again, improving all of these pieces. And there are devices, like this is a Pulsetto, and I will also share a link in the email that I send you for a Pulsetto, and it's got a discount. And you just put that on, and you put a little gel underneath where it sits on your neck, and it conducts the vibration, and you just sit and you just passively allow this device to stimulate that vagus nerve. And it's really quite powerful what it can do. And what's nice is for people who feel like they don't really have time for meditation, but they could put this device on and maybe, do it while they're responding to emails or something like that. So I love my Pulsetto. I think it's also something that I have been doing more of since my blood pressure has been elevated. So I will give that some of the credit for my blood pressure coming down as well. So again, I will share a link for that in the email. There are some supplements that can help. Magnesium can be really critical. If you are low in magnesium, you will be much more likely to have issues with your blood pressure. Omega-3s can help. It's a modest improvement, but they are really, really good for just general heart health. Coenzyme Q10 maybe have a possible blood pressure benefit. Beetroot, or just taking a nitric oxide supplement. You can get just nitric oxide supplements, or you can do it by getting beetroot powder or beetroot juice. Potassium supplements, sometimes if you're not able to get enough potassium in your diet. And then getting a lot of garlic. It has a modest benefit in some people. It's not a cure-all, but it can help, and it's delicious. So why not get more garlic in your diet? Okay, so most importantly, your body isn't betraying you. A diagnosis can make you feel afraid and make you feel afraid of food, afraid of salt, afraid of exercise, and afraid of a blood pressure cuff. But I want people to start changing the question from what's wrong with me or what's wrong with my body to what is my body trying to tell me? What are the different signals that I need to start to give to my body? Instead of taking the number seriously or making it all about your identity. So curiosity over shame. You didn't fail because your blood pressure went up. Blood pressure is information. So remember, it's just data. And yes, we don't want it to be elevated. And when it's elevated over a long period of time, it is dangerous. But it is not a failure. We just need to start asking what could be contributing to this and what things can I work on in my day-to-day life. And then also, how can I partner with my healthcare team to really get the most benefit? So that is pretty much what I have. Heart health isn't about achieving perfect numbers. It's about building resilience and metabolic health, to build strength, to be well-rested, well-nourished, and capable of adapting. So understanding the why behind your numbers. That's just one last testimonial. So I'm going to leave it here. So here's a code. If you want to scan this, you can book a clarity call with me. We can hop on a quick 20-30 minute, no pressure call, just to kind of talk about what's going on with you, what you've already tried, and maybe we can come up with a plan for working together that could help you really optimize your cardiac health, so you really feel like you are thriving and you have confidence in your heart and confidence in your body. So journey is just beginning, and the best is yet to come. So that is what I have for you today. I do have I didn't plan on going this long, so I do have a coaching session that starts in less than a minute. So I apologize if there's questions. I won't be able to take those today, but please feel free to go to heartwellnesscoaching.com. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram. I'm Heart Wellness Coaching or Heart Wellness Coach, and you can direct message me. I'm happy to answer questions. And thank you so much for being here today. And I hope to see you at my next masterclass. I'll be doing them generally twice a month, and they'll be kind of different topics, but always kind of coming back to natural heart health, functional heart health, and how we can not just survive, but thrive. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.